The vibration started in the floor, then it traveled up the legs of my chair and settled deep in my bones. I froze with my hand on the mouse. A low note repeated itself, a dull punch coming through the ceiling from the apartment below. It was 10:05 p.m. and my spreadsheet glowed on the screen, a grid of numbers that held my entire future. My parents always said that quiet diligence was the only path to real success, a lesson I learned while they worked silently at the kitchen table every night. The chaos of my old open-plan office was gone, replaced by this serene apartment I had chosen so carefully. This was my controlled environment, the place where I could achieve the flawlessness my promotion to senior analyst required. The note came again, a physical presence in my silent room. My focus on the financial model dissolved. I pictured someone down there, some thoughtless person without a schedule or a real job, making noise just because they could. I took off my headset, though I had not been listening to anything. The silence of my own apartment made the invading sound even clearer. It was a bass guitar, a slow and clumsy repetition of the same few notes. I stood up and walked to my desk where my miniature painting station was set up. A tiny soldier, part of a complex diorama, lay on its side, vibrated from its spot on the display shelf. This was not just a distraction, it was an invasion. I would not go down and knock. Direct confrontation was inefficient and emotional. The proper way to handle this was through the established channels. I sat back down at my computer, opened a new email, and addressed it to Mr. Kenta Uesugi, the building manager. The subject line was, "Urgent, noise complaint, apartment 3B. In the body, I documented the time, the nature of the disturbance, and the specific violation of the right to quiet enjoyment clause in my lease. I did not add any personal feelings. It was a statement of fact. I pressed send and watched the sound waves on my audio recording software spike with every note from below. An hour later, the noise stopped. The next night, it started again, this time at 9:45 p.m. It was louder. I sent another email to Mr. Uesugi. The night after that, my boss called me out during a video conference. He said my latest projections had a minor error, something he had not seen from me before, and asked if I was losing focus working from home. Panic felt cold in my stomach. The sterile perfection of my remote work was the entire justification for my promotion. After the call, I started a new folder on my desktop titled Evidence. I logged every sound, complete with timestamps and audio recordings. My emails to Mr. Uesugi became daily, each one a new piece of a building legal case against the noise. After a week of my documentation, a formal notice appeared on the main door of the building. It was a general reminder of the quiet hours policy. That night, the bass was silent. I worked with an efficiency I had not felt in days, my fingers flying across the keyboard. I felt a sense of victory. The system worked. My methodical approach had solved the problem. The next evening, however, the noise returned with a new intensity. It was not just practice anymore. It was angry, louder than ever, and it went on for hours. I recorded everything. The next morning, I got an email from Mr. Uesugi. It was not his usual forwarded complaint. The subject was, "Meeting required," and it was addressed to me and to a Juliana Ribeiro in apartment 3A. He requested our presence in his office at 5 o'clock. Mr. Uesugi's office was on the first floor, a small room that smelled of clean linen. He sat behind a polished wooden desk with nothing on it but a single small bonsai tree and two neat stacks of paper. I took a seat in one of the two chairs facing him. A few minutes later, the door opened and a woman walked in. She had long, dark, wavy hair pulled back from her face. She wore a faded t-shirt for a band I did not recognize, jeans with a hole in one knee, and old boots. A tattoo of what looked like a coiled snake was visible on her forearm. She glanced at me with an expression of pure dislike before sitting in the other chair, as far from me as possible. This was the source of the noise. Mr. Uesugi looked at her. "You are disturbing my tenants." Then he turned and looked at me. "And you're disturbing me." He gestured to one stack of papers. It was a thick printout of all my emails, my logs, my evidence. He gestured to the other, smaller stack. "This is the file for apartment 3A. It has 2 complaints in it. one from apartment 3B, one from last night from apartment 4A. My problem has now spread." He folded his hands on the desk. His face was calm, but his voice was firm. "I do not care who is right. I care about peace in my building. Tenant drama lowers property values and creates paperwork. You two will solve this now. You will create a written schedule for noise and for quiet. You will both sign it. This will be a binding agreement. If either of you violates it, I will have grounds for eviction. If you cannot agree on a schedule, I will simply not renew either of your leases in 6 months. The drama will leave my building one way or another." Silence filled the room. Eviction was impossible for me. I had poured my savings into this apartment, into this perfect workspace. Moving would be a financial and professional disaster. I looked at the woman. Her jaw was tight, her arms crossed over her chest. She was staring at Mr. Uesugi, but I knew she was feeling the same trap I was. "Okay," she said, her voice tight. I just nodded. Mr. Uesugi pushed a blank sheet of paper and a pen to the center of the desk. "I will be back in 15 minutes to witness your signatures." He stood up and walked out of the office, closing the door behind him. The woman and I were left alone, the blank page between us like a treaty table in a war we had both just lost. The clock on my screen turned to 6:00 p.m., and the world was allowed to make noise again. Our agreement, drafted in the landlord's stale office, was a week old and had settled into a routine of mutual resentment. Every evening at this time, I would stand by my door listening for the click of her lock in 3A before I would dare open my own. It was a transfer of power, a changing of the guard. The first few days were silent exchanges in the hallway, our eyes meeting for a second before we both looked away. She saw a man in a button-down shirt who was trying to legislate her life. I saw a woman in a band t-shirt who was a direct threat to my career. Then one evening, our timing aligned perfectly and we reached the building's front door together. She held it open for me. I gave a short nod as I passed. The next day, I held it for her. It became a new part of the schedule. I started to notice things, like the worried line that creased her forehead as she clutched a notebook full of handwritten notes. I saw small flecks of white paint on my own fingers one morning from where I had touched up a scuff mark on my wall and wondered what details she saw on me. This new order was supposed to bring focus, but the silence I had fought for was now a different kind of prison. I spent my days watching the clock, my anxiety growing as 6 o'clock approached. The pressure to be perfect in my allotted time was immense. I made a mistake on a quarterly projection, a simple transposition of numbers that my boss caught. I spent an entire night awake, my eyes burning from the screen's light, fixing the error and triple-checking every cell. The next morning, I was pale and exhausted on my video call. The very problem I created this system to avoid had happened because of it. Her side of the wall had its own struggles. Her practice sessions became fractured. I would hear a baseline start, then stop abruptly. Sometimes there were long periods of silence when she was supposed to be playing. One night, I heard raised voices, a man's and a woman's, and the sharp, angry tone of her response cut through the plaster. The music stopped for 2 whole days after that. The silence I wanted felt wrong. The end of the second week fell on a Friday. I was racing against the clock at 5:80 p.m., desperate to get out for some air before her amp started its nightly assault. I grabbed my wallet from the counter, rushed out of my apartment, and let the door lock behind me. At the same moment, she was coming in through the main entrance, struggling with a heavy box that held some piece of music equipment. She propped the heavy front door open with her foot to maneuver the box inside. It slipped. The door slammed shut with a loud bang that echoed in the small vestibule. She turned to get her apartment key, and I reached for my pocket. We both froze. My keys were on the hook inside my apartment. Her building key was still in her apartment upstairs. We were trapped together in the tile entryway, locked out by our shared haste. We stood there for a minute. The only sound was the traffic outside. Finally, she let out a long breath and slid down the wall to sit on her equipment box. "You have got to be kidding me." I called the emergency locksmith number posted by the mailboxes. They said it would be an hour. I leaned against the opposite wall, the cold metal of the mailboxes pressing into my back. The silence between us felt different from the hallway silence. It was a shared problem. My boss told me today he wants more blue skies ideas, I said, looking at the ceiling. Then he sent me a 17-page document on the proper formatting for new idea submissions. She looked up. A small smile appeared on her face. My drummer has perfect timing, she said. A human metronome. But he thinks a sound check is something you write when you buy speakers. I laughed. It felt strange. She laughed too. For the first time, she was not the noise, and I was not the complainer. We were just two people stuck in a hallway, talking about jobs that were harder than they looked. A week later, an email arrived that made my stomach clench. It was the official notice for my final promotion interview, scheduled for the end of the month. The pressure I felt before was nothing compared to this. Later, Jules's band confirmed their showcase at the Velvet Quill. I overheard her on the phone in the hall, her voice electric. A scout from an indie label was going to be there. The stakes for both of us had just become absolute. That night, I needed to work late to prepare for a meeting, but my cursor just blinked on the screen as the sound of her bass started at 6001 p.m. I wanted to march over there, to knock on the door and demand just one more hour. But then I remembered her talking about her drummer, the weight of her band's success on her shoulders. I put on my headphones and tried to work. The next day, I felt a strange urge to help. I understood her problem now. She told me during our lockout conversation that she needed to feel the vibrations through the floor to write. It was a physical part of her process that headphones couldn't replicate. I am a problem solver. That is my job. So I researched a solution. I found a pair of professional studio headphones, ones with a haptic feedback system designed to simulate the low-end frequencies of a bass amp. They were expensive, but they were the perfect answer. A way for her to feel her music without making a sound. A way for us both to win. I ordered them for same-day delivery. The box was sleek and black. I left it outside her door, apartment 3A, without a note. It was a tool, a peace offering. I thought she would understand. Later that evening, I heard her door open and close. Then, silence. I waited, expecting to hear the muffled, contained sound of her new equipment. Instead, I heard a man's voice, then hers, sharp and brittle with tears. I stood closer to our shared wall, straining to listen. "I can't do this," she said, her voice cracking. "He left these headphones at my door. Can you believe the nerve? It's like he's always listening, always judging. He's in my head and the fire is gone. It's just gone." I stepped back from the wall. My solution, my perfectly logical, well-intentioned gift, had not built a bridge. It had poured gasoline on a fire I didn't even know was still burning and then put it out for good. I stepped back from the wall. My hand felt cold where it had touched the plaster. Her words, muffled by the thin barrier between us, had dismantled my entire world. My logical solution had not been a gift, but an invasion. Another piece of evidence in her case against the soulless man in 3B. I looked around my apartment, at the perfect right angles of the furniture and the neat coils of charging cables on my desk. I had built a fortress of order to achieve success, and it had only produced a deeper failure. The silence I had won was not peaceful. It was just empty. My gaze fell on the workbench where I built my miniatures. Tiny, intricate circuits and perfectly soldered connections, a world I could control down to the millimeter. My parents had taught me that diligence was quiet, that progress was a straight, clean line. I believed them. I looked at the tiny, unblinking LED lights on a model train station and understood I had tried to shrink the world down to something I could manage. Jules's chaos was her progress, a messy, vibrant, and loud explosion of creation. I had tried to put it in a box, and in doing so, I almost broke it. The guilt was a physical weight in the silent room. I could not just sit with it. I had to see what it was I had almost destroyed. I opened my laptop and typed "Vapor Lock" and "The Velvet Quill" into the search bar. A flyer appeared on the screen, a grainy black and white photo of Jules and two men, all of them looking somewhere past the camera. The show was tonight. The address was a 20-minute walk away. I stood up and put on the same pressed button-down shirt and clean trousers I wore for work because they were the only clothes that felt like mine. I walked out of my quiet apartment and down the stairs, leaving the door unlocked behind me. I would willingly enter the heart of the noise. The Velvet Quill was a small, dark club, and the air smelled like spilled beer. The floor was sticky under my shoes. I was completely out of place among the crowd of people in worn jeans and black t-shirts. I bought a beer I did not want and stood near the back, my shoulders tight. The opening act finished, and a short time later, Jules walked onto the small stage. Under the red and blue lights, she was a different person. Her hair was loose and her face was focused, confident. She was not the worried woman from the hallway. She was exactly where she was supposed to be. The band started, and the sound was a physical force, bigger than it ever was through the wall. Then they played a song that began with a quiet, intricate melody from the guitar. Jules's bass line was a soft, foundational pulse underneath it. I had never heard this song, not once through the walls. She must have practiced it with headphones after all, finding a way to adapt her process. I had only ever been privy to the raw, frustrating labor, never the finished, delicate art. My annoyance at her noise was a thing of the past, replaced by a deep and surprising admiration. They launched into their last number, a song that started with a slow, deliberate bass line. I knew it instantly. It was the thump thump from Complaint S12, the sound I had recorded as Exhibit A. Here, it was not a nuisance. It was a powerful heartbeat that the entire crowd seemed to recognize. Then, in the middle of the song, her bass amp emitted a loud crackle and died. The music stopped. The sudden silence was shocking. A look of pure panic flashed across Jules's face, the exact same expression of career-ending dread I saw in the mirror when my financial models crashed. My brain took over, overriding the social anxiety that had kept me pinned to the back wall. I walked through the crowd toward the stage where a man in a black hooded sweatshirt was frantically checking cables. He was the sound guy. "It's not the cable," I said when I reached him. He glared at me. "Is the outlet overloaded? Did you check the specific fuse in the amp? What's the voltage rating on the circuit?" My questions were rapid and methodical. He seemed overwhelmed, but he pointed to a power strip tangled with a dozen other cords. I could see that it was old and cheap, the kind that would trip if you plugged in a toaster and a microwave at the same time. "It's that," I said, pointing. "The club's power strip is faulty. It can't handle the amp's draw." The sound guy's eyes widened. He unplugged Jules's amp and ran a new, heavy extension cord from a different wall socket. He gave her a thumbs up. The bass roared back to life and the band crashed back into the song, finishing their set to a massive ovation. A man in the corner who had been taking notes all night was smiling. After the show, I was standing at the bar with my beer when Jules found me. She was sweating and tired, but her eyes were bright. The sound guy must have told her what happened. She shook her head, a small smile on her face. "You saved us back there. I thought we were done for." I shrugged, feeling the tension in my shoulders release for the first time all night. It was a logistical problem. That's my job. She laughed, and the sound was clear and easy. "So, the noise wasn't so bad tonight?" I looked from her face to the now empty stage, raising my glass. "Tonight," I said, "it was everything."